In the past, large buyers, typically retail chains, faced one of two options when maybe a factory that they were working with has had some kind of a problem, a safety problem. One option would be to just cancel the orders and go to the next factory, or maybe the next region, or maybe the next country to seek a safer haven. The other option may be to stay with that factory and maybe even make an investment in that factory to help with the capital to get it up to standard. Now, how does the company make that decision?
Well, first let's go back to the effort on the front end, in that in order to do business to start with, you have to get approval to be an approved supplier. And there are a lot of requirements in order to do that. You must be able to not only be a good producer, but you've got to be able to work with systems that exist within the individual retailer, whether it be Target or Walmart. So you have to have a certain capability to be able to do business. So that is part of the process of being an approved supplier. The second part is the approval process that you have to go through in order to be a certified factory. And that is a requirement that you must be able to complete successfully, or you will not be approved, period, to produce. Most of the major retailers will work with a factory that may have a minor violation to the standard. And a minor violation, they may get, some companies have a factory that is approved, and they call it the green approval process. And they may not have to be inspected but once every 2 years. But if they have a minor violation, they might be classified as, some companies call it a yellow rating, and they have to get the make the correction on whatever minor problem they have, and that is corrected, and they will be inspected at least once a year, if not more frequently. But then there are cases where you have a factory that may be redlined as not being approved, and that would terminate not only the business that may have been originally established, but would cancel all future business with that factory. The retailer will not do business with it. So that's the first aspect of it. Now, in working with a factory, it is not unusual for a major retailer to sit down with a factory and work on an annual commitment. And by doing an annual commitment of saying, we will support 80% of your production, or we will support 70% of your production, that enables a supplier to be able to have a confidence level of getting loans or getting financing to invest in their factory, to improve standards and to be able to get product and sourcing of raw materials at a better price. That it helps them from a standpoint of their growth and development to be able to do more business. So there's a combination of factors of, one, the initial process, and then the investment in that factory from a standpoint of guaranteeing production. And after, if a factory can get let's say a 70 or 80% commitment on their annual production, then that pretty well sets a factory up for being able to run a profitable business. And the other 20% that they may get, they may be able to do runs for another retailer where they might actually be able to get a higher price because they've been able to source product at a lower cost that other retailers may not be aware of, that is built into the cost for that other 20% of their business. So there's a combination of how you can work with a factory that will enable the individual manufacturer to not only have a confidence level to invest in their factory, but actually help them improve their own profitability. It is in the best interest of the retailer to have profitable, good factories. It is not in their best benefit to have poor and poorly run factories. Dan?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Dennis said, and I would build on it a little bit in that, as is obvious from his discussion, there's a lot of sunk cost, upfront costs in this process, where you're certifying, where you're going through this approval process. It takes time, it takes money, it takes effort, it establishes relationships, and relationships, I think, are a key component of this process that are often lost. There's one-on-one interactions, and in least developed countries like Bangladesh, a lot of business is around those relationships. So to get to your question, Dan, I think often it's difficult to leave a country particularly, but even stop a relationship. Now, if you have an extreme example like this Bangladeshi example, obviously you're going to stop. But to stop all your other relationships with manufacturers within a country that you've spent all this money and time and effort, and you may have 2-decade-old relationship with a really high-quality manufacturer that is providing a real high-quality product, to stop that relationship because of another bad actor in a whole different, potentially part of the country, that would be unusual and probably a bad business decision. And I think there's also a brand component to this. Mm-hmm. There's a brand image component to this. And you can see in some cases where companies take real strong action because they feel like their brand is being impacted. And a lot of that's upfront action to protect the brand from these sort of tragedies or problems, but it can also be post. So you've seen Apple do some things in response to the Foxconn suicides and changing some of their sourcing and not using Foxconn for some of their manufacturing now. You've seen Nike take very aggressive steps around sweatshops and that sort of reputation, because that got very strongly attached to the brand in the early 90s and is still there. I'll have an 18-year-old in class that knows about Nike and sweatshops, and that's almost 20 years old now. So I think there's a brand component of this, and companies sometimes can be very, very protective of their brand, and maybe in those cases they may take more extreme steps.